He introduced pensions and audits. Audits is also an important thing. So we have, I'm sure you have as well a government audit office that audit the state's books. And they will certainly also be one of the elements that can detect corruption. So we were a corrupt country until the middle of the 19th century. We had these changes which actually made sort of a big bang on corruption. You saw the dramatic drop in the number of officials that were actually convicted of corruption. So we believe that some of the things that put us where we are, and I would like to stress, we are not perfect. We think we're doing pretty good, but there are some things that we need to fix. Typically, in Denmark, we trust people. Our immediate reaction is to trust people and not to start being afraid. Or so. If somebody asks you, what time is it? You don't start by saying, what do you need that for? Why do you ask me? Are you trying to do something to me? You say, well, it's 10:15 or whatever. So we start out by trusting people. It doesn't mean that we are dumb and we will always trust them, but our initial action is trust. We have a high sense of justice, that is, everyone is equal before the law. Denmark is probably also one of the most, what you would call, egalitarian societies. And actually this house was founded by one of the giants of Denmark. He was called Nikolaj Grundtvig, and he was a free thinker, and he actually had many of the thoughts that make Denmark what we are today. And one of his songs, he wrote that he would like to see a country where few had too little and fewer had too much. I think that's pervasive of how we think of equality in Denmark. We believe that we have an enforcement of a anti-corruption legislation that everyone accepts. We do not like people to steal from the public coffers. We have a reasonable, if not necessarily high, but we have an absolutely reasonable level of pay for public officials. And we have an open society with a very free press. So that means that basically if you're corrupt, you have a very big risk of detection. But there's something still to be done. A couple of years ago, Transparency International, which is the global headquarters, is in Berlin. They made an agreement with the European Union to perform what is called national integrity studies in all of the EU countries. So basically, the EU has paid for this study. There's also been a lot of voluntary work put in the various countries. So this study resulted for Denmark in this book, which is called the National Integrity Study. Unfortunately, it is in Danish, but I'd be very happy to. We are actually in the process of making a compact English version, and I'll be happy to share that with you. What I can share with you and put on the stick, that is the formal methodology behind the study, because in principle you could apply the same study to your or to any other country. It's not Europe specific or anything. But what it does is that it deals with what we call the pillars of integrity. And I should also say that TI in Berlin, they were actually doing a review on the side to make sure that all the studies in the 27 countries were balanced. Because, I mean, you could either be tempted to paint a rosy picture of your country, or you could be tempted to paint a black country. It was interesting because we actually had the final review meeting here in Martow, and we had invited some political parties. And there was also, I remember one said, I don't like the picture you paint. Denmark is very uncorrupt, and if this gets out, that we have these pillars that don't quite reach the ceiling, that will give a very bad impression. So he was sort of on the side to say, well, we are among the best in the world. Why should we tell anybody about our dirty laundry?
Do you think these are all specific to certain cultures, like the Protestant ethic, the Lutheran values? This is possible. Asia is so phenomenally corrupt. We've been corrupt for 5,000 years. These are cultural practices. Maybe to do business with our companies can adopt something.
I think we have been just as corrupt. But I think there are some things that started. For instance, I think that Martin Luther thought of the Catholic Church as very corrupt.
Yes.
I mean, I think corruption is also when you sell absolution. Yes. If you give me one golden daler, then your soul will forever be in heaven. It would be very easy for me as a white Caucasian to say, well, the Asians, they're just corrupt. They are born corrupt and they will die corrupt. Nothing can be done about it. The same with Latin America and Africa. That's just in their genes. But history shows that it's not so. It's possible to change, but it's a lot of hard work. I think if we actually look back on the motives of this king, because not only did he make the law that banned or criminalized corruption, but he was actually also the one who moved from royalty to a democratic constitution, and that happened in 1849. That's when we got our current institution. I think he was actually tired of being the omnipotent, God-given king of a country, and said, well, I don't think this is right. We need to move another way. So this, one of the components was the fight against corruption. Another was actually a move towards democracy. That it's nobody really understands the economic scale of corruption. You have a lot of civil society organizations that look at various concepts, but just like nobody has the right number for, say, the trade of narcotics in the world or tax evasion, you can get some indicators. I'd like to show you here.
He's saying that nobody has an idea of the economic scale of corruption. That is also very important for us, because every audit report says this is $500,000 million, is wasted 200,000. Yes, continue.
So here are some of the key resources that I at least found some very good information in. There's Transparency.org, which is the central global office in Berlin. There's Transparency DK, but I don't think your Danish is so good that you get a lot out of it. Then there's an organization called Global Financial Integrity. And one of the things that they look very much at is what they call illicit financial flows. So for instance, they just came out with a report, I don't have the numbers for India, but saying that China lost $3 trillion in illicit outflows. So simply money that rich Chinese sent. Illicit financial outflow.
Outflow. So that's tax evasion.
It's both tax evasion, it's also capital flight. I mean, I'm sure that those $3 trillion could do a lot of good in China. I mean, it's there must be a lot of people that could use some of them. I don't have the, but if you check, I'm sure you can find the numbers. for India there. So I think that's really, so I've subscribed to the newsletter. I think it's very valuable. Then there's OECD that made an anti-bribery convention where the signatory countries, they have committed to make it illegal for companies from their country to bribe public officials in other countries. So it would be illegal for a Danish company to bribe an official in India to try to get a business advantage.
But if some Danish company is going for a defense contract in India or in any other country, so how they go about it? Sometimes it becomes necessary for them to pay.
That's an interesting question. I mean, you could, because that's some businesses would say, well,